Hey, everybody, this is Eric with the Drum Addict. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Backbeat. I have my friend Matthew Jackson, CCM Drummer, with me today, all the way from Brazil. Matthew, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. I've got my cup of coffee, so I'm ready to rock and roll.
Okay. Well, I got my drink here, so we're liquided up here.
That's right. Excellent, excellent. So I already mentioned that you're in Brazil. Tell me a little bit about that. Why are you in Brazil?
Well, my wife is Brazilian, for starters, and so we've been married for 18 years, and so we decided to go ahead and move back to Brazil. I have a Brazilian green card. They don't call it green cards here in Brazil. They call it an RNM card, but it's the same thing as a green card. And so we're working here as missionaries, and so that's what we do. We're missionaries here, and my job as a missionary is I teach English ESL. I'm a certified ESL instructor, and I also teach drums to kids. And I'm trying to start a drum line here in Brazil with bucket drumming.
Excellent. Very cool.
And my wife does pastoral care, and we're starting an organization called Nova Sheva, where we're trying to reach underprivileged kids and give them a leg up with English classes and drum lessons and whatnot.
Oh, that's excellent. What does Nova Sheva mean?
It means new life.
Excellent. So now is that Portuguese?
Yes.
And talk to me about how fluent are you in Portuguese?
Well, I can speak it well enough to negotiate with the vendors, order food in the restaurants, and ask for directions out in the street. But I'm not fluent enough to debate religion and politics, which that might be a good thing, actually. In my case, I tend to be a lightning rod for controversy. So, yeah, that's probably a good thing. But no, I'm not fluent by any stretch, but yeah, I manage. And then I have my iPhone, which has a translator. If I really get in a jam, I just fall back on my iPhone and speak the English phrase into the iPhone, and then the iPhone translates it to Portuguese, and I play it to the person I'm talking to. So if I
what
really,
a great tool.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? I don't know what Americans did 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
They really had to learn the language.
They had to know all of it.
Yeah.
Now, is it this is totally not a drumming related question, but is Portuguese pretty closely related to the Spanish language?
There are some words they share in common. Sometimes the word doesn't mean the same thing, though. Sometimes the words have the same definition, sometimes they have different definitions. Like moss in Spanish means more. Well, moss in Portuguese means but. But, however,
Okay, gotcha.
So some of the words are similar, but you can, like in Spanish, escuela is how you say school. Well, in Portuguese, it's escola.
Okay.
Or iglesia is how you say church in Spanish. Igreja is how you say church in Portuguese. So they're similar, but they're pronounced a little different. So yeah,
sure.
And of course, I studied Spanish before I studied Portuguese. And when I came down here to Brazil, you cannot speak straight Spanish, because some of the Spanish in Portuguese here in Brazil comes across as rude and crude.
Okay.
So you have to be very careful when I thought, well, if I don't know my Portuguese, I'll just say it in Spanish and maybe they'll understand. Well, half the time that works, and then the other half they'll go, what is this dude? You know. So yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah,
Speaking
that makes
Spanish
sense.
down here. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend who actually went on a trip to Mexico. I know we're going back to the Spanish thing, but she didn't know the word for embarrassed in Spanish, so she did the English thing where this where you're like embarazado. That sounds like a Spanish word, which actually meant I'm expecting or I'm pregnant, and
Right.
so everybody was like laughing at her because they knew that's not what she meant. But yeah, so you can get yourself into trouble with different languages if you don't know what you're what you're
Yeah. And
saying.
she's not the only person that had that problem. I heard other people that mixed up embarrassment for pregnancy with Spanish. And yeah, that's a common tell.
I love it. Yeah, what a hilarious misunderstanding.
Yeah.
so so tell me how you got into playing drums.
Well, when I was a kid, my mom and dad and I, we went to an Asian restaurant. I forgot if it was a Japanese or Chinese restaurant, but you know, at an Asian restaurant, when they serve you your food, they also serve chopsticks, or you can eat with regular spoon and fork and knife if you want. Well,
Right.
after we left the restaurant, they let us keep the chopsticks. We could take the chopsticks home, and the next thing you know, I'd watch drummers on TV or in concert, and I'd always, try to emulate them. So I took my chopsticks, I pretended they were drumsticks, and I'd be beating on pillows and boxes and whatnot. My dad
Yeah.
observed that, so he went to Parker Brothers Music Store and bought a pair of sticks, a practice pad, and a method book written by Haskell W. Har. And he says, if you're going to play, let's do it right. And so then the next year, when I entered junior high, I signed up for band. And that's a common tell for most drummers getting involved in drumming is they sign up for their school band class.
Mm.
And I did that, and of course went through high school and played in stage band, marching band, and concert band, and played xylophone, glockenspiel, chimes, and the whole array of percussion instruments, not just snare drum.
Nice.
I got my first drum set in ninth grade, and then by the time I was in 10th grade, I got good enough where I could play in the stage band.
Excellent. Excellent. How did the learning the snare drum and the other percussion affect your drum set playing?
I would say positively. I mean, it was. In fact, I think a lot of kids. I mean, I've seen kids that will go when they start playing drums. They go straight to the drum set, and you really miss out if it's good to study the snare drum for a year or two, learn the rudiments, get your stick control technique down, get all those things. Where if you go straight to the drum set, you're going to be working more on the quadratic independence type of stuff. And that's good too. You need that as well. But
Right.
yeah, you kind of miss out because later on, you're going to have to go back and do those stick control techniques because you need that when you're doing your fills and you're playing your various styles of music. So
Yeah.
it's all good. And of course, learning how to play the xylophone and the glockenspiel, I learned how to read treble clef, and playing timpanis, you had to learn how to read the bass clef. So it rounds out your music education. You got to have good foundation of music theory. And
Yeah.
that's one of the good things that being in a band program in school does.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I did some school band as well. And even when I was taking drum set lessons, we were in I've got the book sitting down here, but it's open, so I don't know who the person is, but it's the stick control for the snare drummer book. We were using that and along with a drum set book. So that was part of the education, was not just learning the independence of the four limbs, but rudiments and stick control and stick technique, and all of that stuff too. So yeah, I think it should be a marriage of those two different things for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like to me you blended it quite well in your training.
Yeah, I
doing
try
it the
to,
way you
and
do
I
it.
struggle now. Like I tend to work towards a song, so I've had to like discipline myself. Like when I have my practice time, to split it between practicing the craft itself and then the next song itself. Um, so speaking of covers, before we go, there's some other questions I want to ask you about Brazil and music there. But before we do that, kind of piggybacking off of your musical background and education, your channel, CCM Drummer, is kind of unique on the landscape of drum cover channels, where you primarily focus on, I think, what you refer to as like classic CCM, and
Correct.
and then you have a particular approach to that. Tell us about your channel and about your approach to the covers.
Well, I'm a firm believer in playing exact when doing a video drum cover to a commercially recorded song. Okay, now when I'm playing in church, obviously the exact rule doesn't apply.
Right.
But yeah, when it's a drum cover and there's already an established drum part that's recorded, it's been produced, and it's sold several thousands of albums or sells, people, you've heard it many, many times on the radio. People identify with those licks and chops. I try to duplicate that and play exact as much as possible. There's sometimes I'll have to. I'm working on a song right now, and it is extremely difficult. And you got to remember the drummer on this song that I'm recording. He recorded this song at age 29 when he was in his prime. I'm 65 years old. Okay. So I had to round down a few 16th notes to the nearest eighth note
Right.
to simplify a few licks, but I tried to play as closely as possible to the original drummer to maintain that authenticity. So, yeah, I do try, but sometimes I have to cheat a little bit because, and also the song is at 134 freaking beats per minute. That's fast.
It's
So I've got to
clipping.
play
Yeah.
all these fancy licks and chops at 134 beats a minute. And I'm 65 years old. And the original guy that did it was 29 at the time of the recording. And I don't think the original drummer could play it the way he played it now that he's in his 70s, you
Sure.
know.
Who was the
But
original
yeah,
drummer?
David Kemper.
David Kemper. Okay.
He
That's
played
not,
with
not
Jerry Garcia. He played with Bob Dylan. I mean, I wished I had his resume in front of me. I could read it to you, but he did a lot of stuff for Michael Omartian.
okay.
In fact, this will be the third David Kemper song that I've covered. The first one was Rejoice by Second Chapter of Acts, and the second one was Jeremiah by Michael Omartian. And the third one I'm going to do is called Alive and Well by Michael Omartian, and it's on his Adam Again album. That's going to be the next cover coming out. So stay
Okay.
tuned
Excellent.
for that.
Very cool. Now you and I have similar kind of like musical influence in turn. Like I came up a little bit behind you. I'm 48. So there were different bands and stuff I think that were popular in the mix, but we both came up kind of being heavily influenced by CCM.
Right.
What were some bands that were and or drummers that were influential to you as you were learning to play?
Well, second chapter of Acts, Michael Omartian, Phil Keggy, Randy Stonehill, um, and even some of the 80s people like Russ Taff,
Oh yeah.
Petra, and Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, Sandy Patty, of course. Everybody knows who. You don't have to be a CCM buff to know who Amy Grant is or Michael W. Smith. They're
Right.
they're the mainstream society knows who they are, even Sandy Patty. Um, but I would say Jack Kelly was a big influence on me because he played for Second Chapter of Acts, and he was the first drummer whom I've ever saw play open-handed. And
Okay.
at the time I saw him play open-handed, in Dallas in 1982, I said to myself, man, that is so cool. That is so, why didn't I think of that? I mean, the hi-hat's on your left side of the kit. Why not ride the hi-hat with your left hand? It makes perfect sense. And I wasn't in drums at the time, but I promised myself, if I ever get back in drums, I'm going to teach myself how to ride the hi-hat with my left hand since it's already on the left side of the kit.
It makes
And I
sense to
did.
just, yeah, instead of.
Yeah. And I still ride with my right hand when I ride the ride cymbal because it's on the right side of the kit. So I play ambidextrous. But Jack Kelly was a true ambidextrous player. What I saw, and that influenced me. And so I said, yeah, I got to do that. Joe English also, I saw a Joe English concert in 1984. He also plays ambidextrous,
Okay.
like Jack Kelly did. So that was a confirmation. I says, yeah, now I really got to do it that way. But Bill Maxwell was a big influence. Now, early influences in the early 70s was Danny Seraphin, Chicago.
Okay.
You know,
yeah.
I set up my drums like Danny. I played cross-handed and used the traditional grip like Danny. Oh, I thought he was great. And I still do think he was great, but I don't emulate his style anymore because I've developed my own signature style and was influenced by other drummers. But Ian Pace, John Bonham, all those guys in the early 70s. But yeah.
So it sounds like you had a for lack of a better expression, a more well-rounded set of music kind of influencing you. I was very like just CCM, and it wasn't until college that I was like bands that were big when I was younger. I started just discovering outside of the CCM realm, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, etc. But it sounds like you had some of those, like you talked about Bonham and some others, like influencing kind of how you were learning the drums as
Yeah,
well.
before CCM has a strange kind of history because in the early 70s it was just Jesus music.
Mm-hmm.
The term CCM didn't come around until the late 70s. And CCM didn't even start charting their songs and have a top 40 until 1978.
Oh,
So it was before that it was just Jesus music, and the guitar players would strum three chords on the guitar, C, G, and F, or whatever they the three chords, like simple songs, and I'd wished we'd all been ready, and all these Christian music was kind of lame in the early going in that regard, and it took a while. It took the entire decade of the 70s to transition to full CCM where their music was comparable to other genres. It took a while. Yeah. So in the early 70s, I was into the rock scene, but I rededicated my life to Christ in 1977. And then I started playing drums for the Lord. And I went to Bible school in the fall of 77. And my Bible school had some music programs, and they needed a drummer in this one music team. And they said, well, Matthew Jackson plays drums, put him in that group. So I played drums for a year in Bible school, and we traveled, toured the country, did it was basically a cover band, even though we only we had about 4 or 5 originals, but it was basically a cover band,
gotcha.
cover Christian band.
Where did you go to Bible school?
Agape Force Training Institute in Lindale, Texas.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. I went to North Central. It's university now in Minneapolis. It was North Central Bible College when I went in '92. I think I was there '92 to '95. I didn't finish, but I went. And but anyway, that's really really cool. So then you started.
And
So you played with the band there. That's
Lindale,
great.
Texas is in East Texas. And East Texas became an enclave of CCM artists because you had Silverwind there, you had Candle, you had Keith Green, Second Chapter of Acts, Barry McGuire, Dallas Home. If I'm leaving anybody out, I apologize, but it was a long time ago, like more than 40 years ago. And I got to meet these artists and know them. And I met Keith Green.
Oh wow, cool.
And actually talked to him for less than 10 seconds. But yeah, I was working the ice cream bar at this parlor restaurant kind of thing. He ordered a double dip cone without the cone. He says, "Could you just put it in a dish and then squirt some chocolate syrup on it?" And I said, "Sure." Did it, and I said, "That'll be a $1.50 or whatever the going rate was." And he gave me the money, and that was it. That was my encounter with Keith Green.
That's pretty cool, though.
In terms of talking to him. Now, I saw him in concert many times, and I saw him around the campus many times because his people would come on campus and use our recreation facilities and stuff. So I saw him, and I could have talked to him and struck up a conversation, but I didn't know he was going to die at age 28 or 29 and become a legend.
Right, right.
But he was accessible. I could have got up to him, say, "Hey, Keith, how you doing? I play drums, and how come you don't have a band and a drummer and whatever?" I could have done that, but I just didn't do it. I just said, I took him for granted. I said, "Oh, that's just Keith. Hi, Keith. Yeah, okay." That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, I think that's the case, especially like with recording artists, people whose music we enjoy. It was Rich Mullins was the Keith Green for me, like,
Okay.
and not that I ever met him or even saw him in concert, but I was so moved by his music and so also moved by his passing. And it's amazing how
Yeah.
artists can influence us to the point where we actually grieve their death, even though we don't know them, we're not in
Right.
relationship with them. I always found that that's a very interesting dynamic in any kind of entertainment industry, how somebody's art can move you, challenge you, whether it's, in something you're going through in life or in your walk with the Lord in such a way that you feel connected to that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was still in the Bible school. I was finishing up my last semester because I left Bible school in late fall of 82. And he died in like July of 82. So,
Mm.
in fact, his memorial service was at our campus
Oh, wow.
because we had a gymnasium. It was the only facility big enough because a lot of people came.
Sure.
And it was, very, very sobering and impactful because I was just like 2 or 3 miles from the site of the plane crash.
Oh, gosh.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I've been to Last Days Ministries campus. I've actually been there and visited with their folks. So yeah, and I was at the memorial service, and Leonard Ravenhill presided over it, and yeah, it was pretty surreal
Yeah.
losing Keith Green.
Gosh. Yeah. I have a friend of mine who I interviewed him waves back, taught me my first drum groove. He was heavily influenced by Keith Green on a spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that was kind of my first hearing about Keith Green, which would have been like in the late 80s. So after his passing was kind of my
Right.
introduction to some of his music. But some amazing stuff. And then our friend Earl Bennett, I think the first cover I saw of his on his channel was a Keith Green cover, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
think he's done maybe one or two or three of Keith's songs, maybe. Yeah, I know he's covered Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good
And
stuff.
I've covered three of his songs.
Yep. I'm trying. What was the last? I'm trying to remember the last one you did. I should have looked it up first.
But because of you, you love the world and soften your heart. Those are the three songs that I've covered by Keith.
By Keith Green. Excellent. Well, we'll put if I remember from now to when I edit, I'll put the links to those. I'll find those on your channel and I'll put the links in the description.
Oh, I would appreciate
So
that
people
big
can
time.
check. Yeah,
Well,
so people
thank
can
you.
check them out. Keith Green, very, very powerful stuff. He wasn't writing fluff songs at all.
No, and neither was his concerts. Um, when he'd give an invitation to accept Christ, he would never say, "Okay, bow your heads, close your eyes, and if you want to give your life to Christ, just raise your hand." He'd never do that. He said, look, if you're ashamed to become a Christian in front of the people, then you don't deserve to be one.
Mm.
So I'm going to ask you, those of you who want to become a Christian, stand up with every eye open, with every head not bowed. He was just the opposite, you know.
Right. A bold,
Uh,
like kind of like a bold proclamation of
yeah.
I'm choosing, yeah, to be a Christ follower. Right.
So he was not a wimpy Christian in any stretch of the imagination. I've seen probably three or four of his concerts, and yeah, he cuts. He was. We don't have guys like Keith anymore, Christian artists, you know, telling it like it is. You know, we got Christian artists that sometimes I wonder if they're Christian artists. You know, but Keith, man, he was bold. He didn't
Yeah.
screw around, not at all.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's unique and even maybe unique on the landscape in his time too.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of thing. Cause I always remember growing up, like in church, youth group meetings and stuff. It was always, bow your head and close your eyes. And which I understand, but I also understand what Keith was doing too. That
Right.
makes sense to me as well. That's awesome. Well, so let's jump back into drumming in Brazil. How have you, or have you been able to? I'm sure you have, but have you been able to pick up on all the Portuguese terminology for drumming and those things that you need for that?
Yeah. For instance, quarter notes are called seminínimas in Portuguese.
Okay.
Eighth notes are called cocheias, and 16th notes are called semicocheias. And there is a word for 32nd notes and 64th notes, but I don't know what they are because us drummers, we live in the world of quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes for the most part.
Right.
Uh, the snare drum is called a caixa.
Okay.
The hi hat's called a chimbal, and they call the cymbals pratos.
Okay.
So pratos is plates in Portuguese. In
Okay.
Spanish, it's platos, but in Portuguese, it's prato. So they call cymbals plates. So if it's a crash cymbal, they call it prato achaki. If it's a ride cymbal, it's prato condição.
Okay.
Yeah, go figure. The bass drum is called the boomba.
I like that. The boomba.
Yeah, boomba. And the floor tom is called surdo.
Sort
And
of
then
a
the
boomba.
regular, yeah, and then the regular upper tom, the rack tom, it's just called tom. So they use the same word we use, tom.
Gotcha.
But if you're going to
Okay.
talk about floor tom, you can't say tom, you got to say surdo.
A very specific word for the floor top. Gotcha. Neat.
Yeah, so I've had to, learn. I don't know how to say. Oh yeah, sticks. The drumsticks are baquetes.
Okay, jeez.
Baquetes. I don't know how to say foot pedal or the snare stand or the stool the drummer's throne you sit on, but those are the basics, and
Right.
those are the basics you'll need to know if you need to talk to somebody whom you're playing in a band with. That mean, when they say abra a chimbal, that means open the hi hat. They really like the hi hats being opened up on the courses of the songs. And
Okay.
I'm used to, my old rock and roll style. I'm used to keeping that hi hat tight, but on the courses, they want the hi hats open a little bit, sounding a little sloshy. So if I hear
Gotcha.
them say "abra chimbal," I know what they're talking
Nice.
about.
Abrachimo. I love it. And Boomba,
Yeah,
I think, is my biggest takeaway from
yeah, the boom bob.
from this because I like the way that sounds, and I think it sounds like it fits,
Yeah, it does
the
fit.
drum so much. So one more question, and I'm going to edit this bit out. One more question, and then we'll stop and we'll come back. We've got about 4 minutes left. So the church that you're attending in there in Brazil, do you play drums for their band?
Yes, I'm one of three drummers, and I work in a rotation
Okay.
system because they have services on Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night. And that would be too much for one drummer to play all 52 weeks a year,
Yeah.
so we rotate. So I play a couple of Wednesday nights a month and a couple of Sunday nights a month. I don't play Saturday mornings. They got another guy that does that.
Excellent. Okay, so playing at your church in Brazil, is it is it how different is it than playing in an American church? What's the experience difference like?
Well, they don't have as many enclosed drum booths here in Brazil as they do in America, which is a good thing. And I don't play in an enclosed drum booth. And I don't have a problem playing behind a plexiglass shield per se, because all that does is just redirect the sound. You're still involved in the ambience of the room. But it's not, I mean, there's some differences because they have their own praise songs. So I'd say a few of their praise songs, they're English speaking praise songs that we would sing in America, and they just translated the lyrics to Portuguese. So there are a few songs like that, but they have a lot of their own originals. So they don't always translate Hillsong and Elevation and Bethel and or Chris Tomlin, Matt Redman, whoever.
Right.
They've got their own artist and their own and they're pretty good.
Awesome.
So my church is a little unique, and I don't think it's a Brazilian thing. I think it's just a my church thing. The music director is more of a facilitator and a coordinator than he is a director.
Okay.
And so the people leading the singing, the song leaders, in America, most time they're called the worship leaders, but I call them song leaders. But at any rate, we have a song leader by committee type of thing, where we have like 4 or 5 different people who are capable of leading the singing.
Okay.
And there's a difference between singing background vocals and actually leading the singing. It's a
Right.
different skill set. You got to be able to do more than just sing to be the song leader, because you have to give a word of exhortation, and you have to feel the chemistry. And anyway, he gives the song leaders a lot of direction in terms of the quality of the product. So the song leaders, they'll actually during rehearsal direct the praise band if they want the bass player to do something, or the guitar player, drummer, whatever. They'll actually give the musical direction, not the music director, which typically that's what happens. It's the music director or the minister of music. Or now a lot of churches will call them worship pastors, but don't get me started on that. But anyway, so the song leader has more control, and every song leader is different in terms of what their expectations are. Some want you to play exact to the original recording, at least most as possible. Others give you a little more leeway, and so when I prepare for playing at my church, what I do is I take the PDF copy of the lyrics, and then I listen to the song at my house. I take notes, and I use blue ink. And so like in some of your praise songs today, the drums don't come in until the chorus or the second verse. The
Right.
drums drop out, and sometimes they want a tribal groove, or sometimes you start out, you play the verses with the cross stick on 2 and 4, or just 4, and then maybe in the chorus you go to a full groove to snare on 2 and 4. So whatever those distinctives are, I write it down in blue ink.
Right.
So I know
Nice.
exactly how the drummer did it on the original recording. Then when we get to rehearsal, if the song leader wants to change that, then I take my red pen and I change it with red ink. Or I
Okay.
remember. If it's something real simple that I just don't note it, I just remember it. But if I can't remember, I write it down. And
Yeah,
then
so
I
you got a
keep the
nice
music.
system. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I put the music or the words and all the notes on the bass drum next to the tom, and I just look, and while I'm playing, I just look down there. Okay, I got to do a ride cymbal here. Okay, and then tribal tom groove. Some of those praise
Right.
songs have those tribal tom grooves now. That's very
Yeah.
popular in praise music, or what Americans would call worship music. And so if they have that, I have to break it down and analyze, okay, what kind of tribal groove are they doing? The tom groove are they doing? And if I
Right.
don't play exactly what the original drummer plays, I try to come as close as possible to
Right.
pull it off. So that's how I prepare and deal with
Gotcha.
it.
Gotcha. I noticed that you were talking about things that are popular in church type music, and one thing that has been popular, and I think I'm hearing less of it in songs that I learned for church, but I don't know if this is what everybody calls it, but I call it the chug. So like I always joke, like in a bridge, if you're gonna build, just there was so much
Mhm.
of that. I felt like in every song that was the go-to dun 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 dun. And then when you come out, maybe you modulate. So you're riding on the crash to get this real big sound. And I would joke, I'm like, I don't even need to hear the song to know that this is what the drummer is going to play. Now we're breaking away from that, I think, more and more, but it's funny how you get those trends.
We do a lot of chugs in here in Brazil, and that's a common doing the build up, the increase, the crescendo.
Yeah.
And you got to build up without speeding up, but you got to increase your volume but maintain tempo. Yeah, if someone's going to be a praise drummer in a praise band, you're going to have to learn that technique. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. So playing in Brazil and with the different language, Portuguese, um, the way you just talked about like making notes, how is that different with a different, like working with folks that are speaking a different language versus how you would prepare in like an American church if we were all speaking the same language?
Well, it's much easier if we all spoke the same language. Sometimes I get lucky, and there'll be one guy in the praise band that can speak English. Now, my Portuguese is getting a little better, so I'm not quite as dependent on that as I used to be. But
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah. But we manage to get through the language barrier, and of course having the lyrics to the song all printed out on a sheet with all my notes. If I have a question, I could just point to the section of the song that I have a question about, and they usually get it. And they say, "Oh no, do it that way," and or whatever. Sometimes, on the record, they'll repeat the chorus or the bridge. Well, they'll repeat the chorus after the bridge 3 times. And maybe they say, well, we'll just do it 2 times. They'll
Yeah.
just say duas vezes. I know what duas vezes means, 2 times. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But so, yeah, we manage. But yeah, having that sheet with the notes on it, that's really the big coping
Yeah.
mechanism, or the how I don't know what term you want to use. I don't know. Coping mechanism may not be the best term, but you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
the best tool that I've been able to utilize to account for the language barrier.
Gotcha. So it sounds like now where you're at with it, it's not nearly as big of a barrier as it would have been when you started
Right.
playing in Brazil.
Because now I got a system.
Yeah.
You know,
And you know enough of
I
the language too to
yeah, I know enough of the language, just barely enough to, the basic terminology. But yeah, listening to the song beforehand, taking notes on the actual lyric sheet,
yeah.
that did the trick.
Nice. Now I think the biggest question um is, do you know how to play the samba?
You know, I thought I knew how to play samba when I was in America. Because, when you're in a band in America, in a cover band, and the band leader says, okay, we're going to play this song, XYZ, whatever the song is. But when we play it, let's give it a samba feel. And so the bass player automatically knows to go boom, 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 boom. The drummer automatically knows that on the bass drum you go boom, 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 boom. Well, I grew up, in America thinking that's samba. All right. Well, I learned when I came here to Brazil, there is a lot more to samba than that. I mean, that's just the basics. Samba has a bunch of layers. It's very, very intricate, very detailed, very. So I learned that when I came to Brazil, I don't know anything about samba. It's more than just boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. And so now I'm really learning it. I have 2 books that's just, I could study samba full time for the next 10 years and not know everything there is to know about samba here in Brazil. It's that deep, that rich.
Wow.
There's a lot of rhythms and counter rhythms and the boom, ba boom, ba boom, but that's just the base. That's just the foundation. So yeah, I'm now learning samba because when I teach kids how to play drums, the bucket drums, I incorporate that stuff because I'm teaching them their own culture.
That is very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. So what has it been tough to like break that American mindset of samba and bring it over to actual, like, the actual cultural version of
It's a
samba?
challenge. It's a challenge because you play samba in different ways. Because samba originated with hand drumming.
Okay.
And they don't have congas and bongos down here in Brazil. They have timbas and habolos, which they're hand drums. And then from hand drums, a drummer by the name of Nene, he's a jazz drummer. He's kind of like the Buddy Rich of Brazil.
Okay.
He took those rhythms on the hand drums, incorporated them on the drum set. And then, of course, you got the Brazilian drumming on the streets and at the soccer games. Those rhythms are samba based as well. So there's different applications of that. And yeah, it's in the hand techniques on the hand drums, because the left hand will be on the shell playing the upbeats, and then the right hand will be on the head playing the 1 and 3 beats.
Okay.
And they'll go bump, ba bump, bump, ba ba bump, bump, ba ba. They'll have different. Yeah, it's very intricate. It takes
cool.
a long time to master that.
Sure. Yeah,
But
it
I
sounds
love
like
it.
it. But you
Yeah,
love
I
it. That's
love
the
it. It's
important
great.
thing. I love that. I love that. So tell me, what are you in terms of what you're playing? What are you playing at church in terms of your kit? What are you playing in your home studio when you're doing your drum covers?
Well, the kit is the house at church. The kit at church is the house kit,
Okay.
and it's a pearl.
Okay.
And the ride cymbals is Sabian. The crash cymbals made by not a brand that most Americans would know, but it's very bright, which is not good. In the room we're playing in, where there's no acoustical padding. I mean, it's all tile, cement, and glass in my church.
Oh
So
wow.
you really have to control your volume, pull your strokes. But this, it's hard to buy Zildjian's, Paiste, Sabians, and also the American brands that we're accustomed to, like DW, Gretsch, Pearl, Ludwig, Tama. I'm sorry if I'm leaving any other brands out, but you know what I mean,
Right.
because the Brazilian economy is very protectionist down
Okay.
here, and you pay a higher price because of the import tax. So
Gotcha.
I bought a Taiwanese knockoff, and now my snare is a DW. I was able
Okay.
to buy that in America, bring it down here to Brazil. But the bass drum and the floor toms, that's kind of hard to fit in a suitcase,
Yeah, it
you
is.
know. So I just went ahead and bought that down here, and my ride cymbal I bought down here, and then I upgraded the drum set, my toms, with better rims. I replaced the rims. I bought the rims in America through Sweetwater or Drummer's Factory Direct, one of those catalog order deals, online deals. So the rims are better, the heads are better, and I stripped the drums down and I put it on a flat surface, marble tabletop or countertop surface, and find out which side of the drum has the best bearing edge, and put the performance head on that side. The other side, I use a silent stroke head for practice purposes.
Okay.
Gotcha. So that's how I do that. And then I have another snare for practice, which has a silent stroke head. And then I have low volume cymbals for practice. So I can convert my kit to the actual kit using the real heads and real cymbals, while I'm recording the cover. But when I'm practicing for the cover, I use the silent stroke head. I just flip the toms over, flip the snare drum over, change the mallet out on the bass drum pedal, and use that's how I do it.
So if you got the silent stroke head on your on the bottom side, so you're pretty much just kind of doing like the concert tom thing then, where you've just got the one head. Okay.
It's almost like having no head, because the silent stroke head has no effect on the batter head at all.
Yeah.
None. So no matter how tight I tighten the silent stroke head, it doesn't affect the batter side, where that would happen if you had a real head, bottom head.
Right.
The tighter it raises the pitch. But no, the silent stroke has no bearing at all.
That's a cool setup. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easier to tune the batter head when you just have to worry about one head.
Right. Absolutely. It's just this that you're working with, and not the relationship between the reso head and the batter head. But that's a neat system though. And then you just like flip it over. You've got the silent stroke head for rehearsals, ready to record, flip it over, and you've got the regular batter.
And my rack tom is on a snare drum stand.
Okay.
So, and when you have a tom on, like, let's say if you did not have a silent stroke head on your bottom head, and you had a regular bottom head, when you know how the basket to the snare drum, you have three things, and you tighten it up. Well, if the bottom head has a regular bottom head, that's part of the tuning. You can't tighten that too tight, because if you do, it's going to affect the sound of the drum. You're going to choke it. So you just tighten it barely tight enough where it holds the drum on the stand, where it doesn't fall off.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with a silent stroke head, you don't have to worry about that. You can tighten that bad boy as tight as you want. You'll never have to worry about affecting the sound of your drum.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
If you've got the silent stroke on, yeah.
I love it. Well, tell me, what advice would you give? And I love to ask this question because I get so many different answers. What advice would you give to somebody starting out on the drums?
Well, learn everything you can from everyone you can. Work on your stick control technique. I know it's boring, and we have young drummers today. They watch MTV and they watch these videos, and they want to become these video MTV drummers in 60 days. Back when I was learning drums, we didn't have that. We didn't have instructional videos. Now, we had clinics back then in the 70s, and then you had your private drum instructor, and then you had your band classes, and you watched other drummers, and that was all the resources we had. But now, in the 80s, when MTV came out and the proliferation of videos, and then of course in the 90s when the internet came out, actually that didn't come out more till the late 90s, early 2000s when you really started to see that. But a lot of young drummers, they see the end product, but of the drummer playing on there, says, "Oh, I want to be like that," but they don't understand that those drummers put in hundreds and hundreds of hours of practice and work to get to where they are.
Yeah.
This is not a plug and play type of situation. This is not just add water and then set to
Right.
350 degrees and, open the oven when it comes out 30 minutes late. It's not like that. So yeah, you got to put in your time, your hard work, and work on your stick control techniques. And yeah, it's boring exercise, but you got to do it. I mean, that's what, all the great drummers that you see and admire so much. That's what they did.
Yeah.
That's what Steve Gadd did. That's what Danny Seraphin did. Dave Weckl, Vinny Cauda,
Yeah.
you name them. They all did that. Terry Bozzio. So yeah, just work on your craft and so master those stick control. Spend a little bit of practice time on your stick control techniques, and then if you want to work on your quadratic independence, fine, do that because you need good chops, good feels, good independence, and learn to play open-handed.
Okay.
Especially if you're beginning, it's easier to start learning how to ride the hi-hat with your left hand in the beginning. If you've been playing 10 or 15 years playing cross, yeah, that's going to be a tougher transition for you. But
Yeah.
if you're starting out and you already suck anyway, go ahead and practice riding the hi-hat with your left hand. And believe me, when I started, it took me about 6 months to where I could hold down a groove riding the hi-hat with my left hand. Because it's not natural, believe me. It was hard.
Yeah.
And I really had to talk to my left hand a lot and say, listen, Mr. Left Hand, you are going to ride this hi-hat.
And
I'm
you're gonna
not
like it.
bringing your brother right hand over to play the hi-hat for you. You got the hi-hat on this one. But if you do that, it opens up tons of possibilities because you could do one-handed tom grooves or fills while you're holding down a groove with your left hand on eighth notes.
Yeah.
It opens up a ton of possibilities. You can do double ride combinations. I can ride the hi-hat and the ride cymbal at the same time and keep a backbeat on 2 and 4.
Yeah.
You can't
Nice.
do that if you don't know how to use your lefty.
Right. Well, I imagine too that it would help with like as a right dominant person, I don't have to work as hard with my right hand to get it to do stuff. But my left hand, I have to make it work harder. So if you're starting
Yeah.
to, I mean, and there's ways to do that on the snare drum, but that's just, I feel like that's using the left as another way to build that your non-dominant hand independence and
It
get it
makes
up
you
to
all that
speed.
more versatile.
Yeah.
And it's just like in sports, the switch hitters, if you're a switch hitter in baseball, if you can bat from either side of the plate, that makes you a more versatile player, especially to opposing pitching. Okay. Soccer players, like the
Yeah.
famous soccer players, the world class soccer players, they can kick the soccer ball with their left foot just as good as with their right.
Right.
Basketball players, they can dribble the basket. In fact, when I was playing basketball, my coach would make us dribble with our left hand during the drills and practices.
Yeah.
And LeBron James and those famous ball players, Michael Jordan, they could drive and dribble with their left is just as good as with their right. So that same principle in athletics applies in drumming as well. That's just another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It makes you that more versatile.
Yeah, that's great, dude. I've never thought about it in terms of I've played cross, for X years, right? Like, and I'll kind of do like something I like to play with is like a little paradiddle thing between the ride and the hats, so the hats get
Yeah.
my left hand, and but I've never done a lot of just like playing open handed on the hats like that. So it might be something that I have to kind of experiment with in my rehearsal time.
You'll have to commit to some time to doing it. Another challenge for you cross-handers that if you're thinking about going open-handed, you're probably going to have to lower your hi-hat about 3 or 4 inches because usually I can look at a drum set and I can already tell if the drummer is a cross-hander or open-hander just by the level of the hi-hat because when you cross over, you have to raise the hi-hat up a little bit so it doesn't interfere with your snare hand, the left hand, which
Yeah.
is the snare hand. Where in open-handed playing, you can lower that hi-hat. My hi-hat's almost the same level as my snare, maybe the same level as my upper tom, but it's lower. You don't need to
Gotcha.
raise it up. And so, yeah.
That's interesting. It's a
So,
very different way to approach play. Yeah, that's
yeah.
and I like the way that it sounds like it helps with the independence. So that's some really good advice. And I love getting those tidbits of wisdom from folks and things that have worked for them. And then just kind of we get to share that with, whomever watches. And then they can, integrate that into just becoming a better musician, a more well-rounded musician. And sometimes it's just fun to challenge yourself to learn something new. And that definitely playing open-handed like that is certainly, for me, I know would be a challenge.
Also, when you do your stick control exercises, lead with your hold on a second. I got an incoming call, which is
Oh,
calling me, but okay. Sorry about that, folks. What I feared the worst came upon me. Anyway, when you do your stick control exercises, lead with your left hand, not with your right. So that'll also build up your offhand. You know that song Wipeout?
yeah.
Well, learn to play Wipeout left-handed.
With the left-hand lead.
Yeah. So whatever you do, right-handed, do it left-handed. Just switch over. Your audio's weak. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I can barely hear you, but that's okay. We're about to end this thing anyway, I suppose.
We're wrapping up. So we'll cut those little bits out. I can cut out the little bit where you got a phone call, because the way you started back into it was you said when you're doing your stick control. So I love when people do that,
good.
because it gives me an easy place to chop stuff out and put it together, and it audio wise it's seamless. It just sounds like we jumped into the next question, which is great. And anyway, so what we'll do now is we'll kind of go into our outro. I'll do my thanking you for being here and all that good stuff. So we'll cut all that.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Oh well, dude. The pleasure is all mine. I'm excited that we got to do it. So sorry, I'm a little distracted. My wife texted me a minute ago. She goes, "Let me know when you're done. We have to reboot everything." She's having issues with her work computer. So bless her heart.
Give my best to your wife, Loretta.
I will. Thank you, man. Thank you, man.
And I appreciated her word. I saw your cover yesterday by Matthew West. And he's more of a later CCM artist, but he's good. And I really appreciate what Loretta said on the post log.
I'll pass that on to her. I'm so proud of her. Like, getting on camera for her is she's been doing it for a while now, but it was a big thing for her to, jump in and want to be on camera. And and I love just the dynamic of her sharing, what's on her heart with something is just, for me, that's such a powerful thing to hear and to listen to.
Yeah, it was good.
And it gives everybody a break from my mug.
Yeah.
It's good.
Not that you do a bad job. You do a great job yourself.
Oh, well, thank you.
But it's good to mix it up, put Loretta in there a few times. And, because she's an integral part of Drum Attic. And it's really neat that y'all have the relationship and the arrangement that y'all have. That really inspires me. So I like that.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super blessed. It would be hard to do what we do in the Drum Attic just on my own. So I'm very thankful that she not only is such an important part of it, but that she enjoys it. she enjoys doing it. And often she'll tell me, she'll be like, don't you need to practice today?
That's good.
I'll be like, yeah, I do, but I'm tired. She's like, yeah, but we got to record this weekend, so you need to work, you know. I'm like, okay, babe. So it's nice to have that for sure, for sure. Well, hey, you guys, if you haven't already, head on over to Matthew's channel, CCM Drummer. I'll put a link in the description, a link in the comments, and we'll throw one up here as well. Sub to his channel, some great stuff going on over there. You'll really be happy you did. Matthew, thank you again for hanging out with me this morning. It's been a lot of fun.
Very welcome.
Excellent. Well, you guys, thanks again for stopping by, and we will see you next time.